16th, a man with nothing to live for
We're really sorry about your family.
will become a hero
Don't let your memories kill you.
They can't kill me. I'm already dead.
with everything to fight for.
Those who do evil to others will come to know me well.
No one's ever stood up for me before. The Punisher, rated R, in theaters everywhere, April 16th.
Get ready for punishment, everyone, and welcome to Cinemarcade. This is the podcast about movies, video games, and the gore that flies when those two worlds collide. My name is Steve Guntley, and I'm going to write a song about you before I kill you. Who's here with me?
J-Ban.
And I'm Justin.
Oh, and Justin is here with a choice of his, a Justin's choice, if you will, because this
Yeah.
week, well, what are we talking about, Justin?
We're talking about the 2004 Punisher movie starring Thomas Jane and John Travolta.
Absolutely, absolutely. They have inverse nicknames, or inverse initials, I just realized. TJ and
Oh.
JT. I
Yeah.
think that's really representing the duality of their characters, you know. Good and
Yeah.
evil, light
Yeah,
and
yeah,
dark.
the duality of their nature, the duality of horrible and
And
horrible.
Get this.
J-Van wasn't
I don't know
happy.
if you guys caught this because it's very subtle. John Travolta's villainous character is named Saint. Oh, do you get that? Do you get that? Do you see what they did there? Because a saint is a good guy, and
Yeah.
he's not. Yeah, so...
And everybody named Howard sucks. So
Literally every one of them, every single one of them. Sorry, all you Howards out there. I know we're very big in Howard Town,
if your name's Howard, go by Howie or something else.
or H Dizzle.
How goes it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All of those are better options. Yeah, that's right. We're talking about The Punisher this week. I'm excited to get into this one because it's a weird ass movie. It's a weird ass game. It's a weird ass moment in history that I think we've captured with this confluence here, and I'm always excited to talk about it. This was one of the harder to find movies that we had to get. I think outside of Gotcha, this was the hardest movie to find.
Yeah.
Because whatever reason, this movie's kind of been memory hold. So we had to find a very obscure app and pay ridiculous amounts of money to get to watch an SD version of this movie.
I watched it in 1080p.
Well, Mr.
I don't know if it improved the experience, but I enjoyed it. I had fun.
Well, that might have helped something with it. But The Punisher was released April 16th, 2004. It's directed by Jonathan Hensley. It's written by Hensley and Michael France. And it stars Thomas Jane, John Travolta, Will Patton, Roy Scheider, Laura Herring, Ben Foster, Eddie Jemison, John Pinette, and of course, because it's an early 2000s movie, Rebecca Romaine needs to be there. We are talking about a really rather unique character, especially in terms of Marvel Comics. Now, we're in a time when everybody and their mother knows every deep-cut Marvel character. You know, there's whole movies and TV shows based around the Guardians of the Galaxy and Moon Knight. But when this movie came out, The Punisher was still a little bit of an obscure property, at least for non-comics readers. And so it was an interesting choice to make this character into a movie. I want to give a little bit of history on the Punisher because I think he's really interesting and a weirdly important character.
And I think it's important to qualify the Punisher, publisher.
Prepare to be published. You've made my dreams come true. You're welcome.
That's what they
I
call
know you've been toiling hard on your novel.
That's what they would call Spider-Man if he went dark. He'd be a publisher, and he would write about it in the news.
Sorry. we cut you
No,
off.
I deserve to be made fun of for that. That the Punisher, the comic book character, is not Punisher from the movie.
No.
And like it's just the comic book character is so interesting in like has such gravitas, which I don't think was carried over to the movie. But I'll let you continue on.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of anti-hero is par for the course these days. I mean, Amazon Prime has at least 3 TV shows about superheroes that are also bad guys. So, like, it's
What's
kind
the
of...
third?
I don't know. I think there's 2 different boys shows.
Generation V.
And Invincible, right?
Yeah.
Those are, yeah,
Okay.
there's probably more that I'm not realizing. There's about to be a Boys Mexico, so it's going to be 4. Yeah, either way. But yeah, so this kind of anti-hero, like, comic book character is pretty par for the course these days. But when this character was created, he was sort of breaking new ground. He started as a villain before morphing into kind of this hard-edge anti-hero, but he's never fully lost his edge, and he resorts to levels of violence that are often morally reprehensible and definitely outside of what usual superheroes do. Very singular in his methodology, and his sociopathic single-mindedness allows... I think really good writers can do really good things with the Punisher. I think you can... when you get a smart writer, he becomes a satire about the American fixation with guns and with the male equating with violence and virility, you know?
Well,
you can
and
do
I think-
interesting things with him.
I think the Punisher works best when it's paired with someone. So I can't remember. It's been a long fucking time.
Yeah.
But there was a Punisher Wolverine crossover, and that was fantastic. And like I like Punisher in the Daredevil Netflix series as a foil for Matt, of which you're like, Matt, you can't keep going to the dark side because Matt's going to the dark side because like Frank Castle's he's already there.
Exactly. Yeah, he paved the way already. This character was created by Jerry Conway and the artist John Romita and Ross Andrew, and he made his debut in Amazing Spider-Man number 129 back in February 1974. Back then, he was a hired assassin who was paid by a supervillain called the Jackal to kill Spider-Man. And the character was unique and a little shocking for the time because his proclivities for violence and very direct approach for murder was pretty unlike anything in superhero comics at this time. Even the villains, like, it's usually an elaborate scheme, right? It's lowering the hero from a chain into a pit of lava or something like that, like something they can easily escape. The Punisher just shoots you in the face. You know, and that's pretty unique for this time. You know, there was a lot of controversy when the character came out. You know, because he was so violent and so brooding and so unique to comics in a lot of ways. But despite or because of that controversy, he became very popular. He returned to Spider-Man a few issues after for a few one-shots, and then he got a full run of comics starting in the 80s. And it was eventually revealed the character's name is Frank Castle. He's a former Marine and Vietnam veteran who took jobs as a hitman for the mob, and then after his family was killed in a mafia hit, he snapped and decided to wage a one-man war against anyone that he deems as a criminal. So sometimes he'll collaborate with other like street-level Marvel characters, your Daredevils, your Ghost Riders, your Blades, guys like that. But most of the Marvel canon refuses to work with him, or like if they do, they do so very reluctantly. Yeah, exactly. He's bad PR, you know. Like you don't want to be seen like in photos like being chummy with the Punisher. You use him if you have no other resort. And yeah, the character's legacy, you know, I've been reading I became aware of the character in the 80s. It was one of the first like comic book characters that I kind of got into way back then, and it was because I was, you know, a child and I didn't understand what I was seeing. I just thought it's like, oh, a big strong guy with guns, he must be cool, you know, because I have a stick and I pretend it's a gun. I'm the playground. I'm the same guy. You know, so I never really thought about it. I remember
Steve still is the same guy.
I'm still the same guy. I've got a stick. I'm holding a stick on all of you right now. But yeah, he
Please send help.
when I was a kid reading Punisher comics, he was much goofier, right? He had like a bus. He had like his battle bus that he rode around, and he had a sidekick named Microchip who helped him like look things up. They kind of
You have a sidekick to Google things for you.
basically, yeah, he's got a whole bus for this, you know. You know, so he was a little goofy. He was a little defanged back then.
Hey, Justin, in
I
a
know.
time before
Time before
Google,
Google, it was-
you know,
I
you
know.
actually had to do research and
Yes,
like
none of us here
you
were
had
alive
to
before then.
Yeah,
telephone
I
people. You had to. No, have you? When's the last time you've been on a phone with someone?
Must have been on a phone with someone. I mean, it's been a minute. I can't remember.
When's the last time you used your rotary phone while eating war rations?
I think it was last week. My grandma called after
Okay.
I got home and was like, "I'm glad you got home."
See, and
I
your
was
grandma,
like,
who
yeah.
is our age, only knows how to communicate via phone. So, so like, yeah, the character was kind of defanged when I first got introduced to him. I think there was an NES game that I used to play, like kind of a side-scrolling.
Well, it's
shooter
interesting
thing.
because like he starts off as being a member of the mafia.
Yeah.
And so he's an anti-hero because he's a member of the mafia who then goes against the mafia. But they really sanitize, they attempt to sanitize him to make him like an ex-FBI agent, ex-military, ex-DEA
Yeah.
agent, which I think is really interesting because I think it works it's a more interesting character development if he goes from being a part of the mob to murdering the mob.
It is, yeah, and I think the people who write the Punisher the best, I think of like Garth Ennis and guys like that.
Yeah.
Like they write him as a sociopath, which I think is the way you need to do it. The Punisher's whole thing is that he has a very black and white moral philosophy. If someone is violating a law, he kills them, and that's it. Like
Jaywalking.
literally,
Murder.
there is an arc where he starts going crazy and like is murdering people who litter. Like there is this is something that happens with the Punisher from time to time. He will just go crazy and start killing everybody.
And
So like,
what happens after that? Is it just like he stops and everyone's like,
they give him a stern
yeah,
talking
we'll let
to.
it slide?
Yeah, I
if,
forget.
if you help us do this thing.
I mean, knowing Marvel Comics, he probably just like dies a lot and then gets brought back in like 10 issues. Like he's just gonna be back. But I think that's when you can really have fun with this character, when you're exploring that he is a sociopath, that his moral code is clean and clear, but it's reprehensible. And he is killing people that do not deserve to die. And that's why it makes it all the more ironic that in recent years, this character's legacy has become inextricably tied to the far-right movement. Like, Proud Boys have adopted this Punisher logo. Law enforcement, very randomly, has adopted the Punisher logo as, a symbol for, backing the blue. And it's just do you not know who this character is?
Which is wild considering the most recent iteration in media, in video, being the Netflix version, where it's like the 2004 movie is at least somewhat vague on how crazy is he going with this. Is this just a revenge story? But the Netflix series is like, nah, dude's just killing people.
He's
That's what he's up to. That's what he's doing. He's killing a lot of people who deserve punishment of some kind.
Yeah.
Probably not mass murder.
That's why it's smart to cast a real short fuse guy like John Barenthal in that part.
Yeah.
A guy who seems like he has a lot of coiled rage and energy and things like that. He's a good actor because he can convey that while also still being sympathetic in a way. And so it was good casting on that part.
He gets introduced in Daredevil.
Yeah.
And then there's 2 seasons of him on his own. And in Daredevil, it's pretty clear that he is a black and white, you deserve death or you're fine.
Yeah.
And then in the series, it does double down.
Well, yeah.
There's multiple people who are not doing anything super crazy that end up getting hurt.
And plus, the Punisher grew into this age of regular mass shootings in American culture. He seems less fun the more,
Absolutely.
the more people out there are emulating it.
Watching the show, you like his character when he's not doing these things,
Right.
But you can't like him overall.
You can't fully ever
'Cause,
empathize.
Yeah, there's so many things, especially it's been a minute, but it definitely very clearly paints him as he's a bad guy who just also sometimes does good things.
Yeah.
But most of what he's doing is bad. He thinks it's good, and he is to some degree vaguely in the right direction. However, again, it's a lot of things of maybe jail time or rehab is more applicable for some of these people, for a lot of these people, than what you have done to them.
Men would rather shoot up an entire crack house than go to therapy.
Yeah,
basically,
up
is
until
what
the
you're saying.
points where there are people who are specifically targeting him, and then you start
That's referencing the game.
Yes.
that is referencing the game. But then the 2004 movie, I think, is so they have him be so quiet.
Yeah.
So are we getting into the movie yet, or are we still
think
talking
so.
about the comic book?
I've got a little history on the movie here.
Okay.
I just want to get into it because this is actually the second attempt to make a Punisher movie. I don't know if you ever saw the 1989 one
didn't.
with Dolph Lundgren playing
Oh.
Frank Castle. Kind of fun, a little fun. That movie was a solid hit international, but never actually got a stateside release here. It became kind of a direct-to-video sort of wonder after a bit. But this film is part of the first wave of Marvel characters kind of hit the screen. We're in this kind of weird Wild West zone where like X-Men and Spider-Man were huge hits, but we don't have as codified like MCU yet. So they're trying to figure out what characters should we make films of. And for whatever reason, early on they went with like the darker, more adult characters. So it was Blade, it was Daredevil, it was the Punisher, it was Ghost Rider. It was
Blade was so
Hulk.
good.
Blade
well.
is so good. Hulk, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the darker, more violent characters.
And I don't know if it's a testament to the quality of some of those projects or if it's a testament to the tone of some of those projects, but it didn't take off until Iron Man.
No, I think that's the thing. They needed.
They had limited like
They weren't
Spider-Man.
successful.
Spider-Man was a huge
All three
success.
Spider-Man were huge.
I'll say Spider-Man.
And
yeah.
the X-Men movies were successful, but like
their attempts to like really like there were movies that were hitting and it was hitting people were liking just that character.
Yeah.
Like there was nothing as big as like Iron Man setting this whole new thing of like, oh, this is now a lot of things that we're gonna watch now. Not that they did bad movies, but like specifically some of the ones that we mentioned, The Punisher didn't light the world on fire.
no, it really didn't. This was the directorial debut of Jonathan Hensley. You might better know him as a screenwriter who writes big action movies. So he wrote Armageddon. He wrote a movie that J-Ban and I both love, Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Yes, he wrote Jumanji,
yeah.
the original.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so this guy had some bona fides, and I think this wound up being his only directorial effort. Maybe a couple of TV
No, he directed a couple of more movies, including Ice Road, starring Liam Neeson. Like very voodoo, like the app style of
very
movies.
direct to Crackle level.
Direct, yeah,
Direct
definitely.
to Redbox, yeah.
And I don't know, man. It was interesting trying to find this movie. We had to scroll through Vudu because Vudu, the app, doesn't have a search function.
Yeah, okay, we need to take a minute to punch down at the Vudu app here. It already is suffering enough by being the Vudu app. But that's the only place we could find this movie legally is through VUDU. And we discovered this looking this up, that this website, for whatever reason, does not have a search function. Like one of the most basic things you would expect. You can filter like your sections, like you can go into like action genre and then filter it by year. But every time I did that, it made the app break.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the way to find this was to go into the action movie section, scroll down like 15 pages, and just hope that your eyes didn't glaze over the cover.
Well, it's really funny because I started off searching in the free movies, and the free movies has a movie called Punished with an exact same sort of cover with a Punisher the guy wearing a Punisher shirt, and I'm just like, oh dear.
I mean, I think
I'm
Tom
sure
Jane's
that
probably
movie
in that one too.
was incredible.
I mean, so our lead here is Thomas Jane. All right, so
Yeah.
interesting career that Tom Jane was having around this.
Thomas Jane. So the only upside to this movie is probably the amount of time this man has spent shirtless. And if Jeremy Allen White's shirtless pics from CK didn't drop today, I would have been like, I don't know.
It's the second time that's been referenced to me today. I did not know that weird turtley looking guy is like such chum for the ladies. But hey.
you check him out on Twitter.
Who is
Yes,
this?
the lead from the show The Bear.
What's his name?
Jeremy Allen White.
Like he has like nothing but thirst traps from his CK1. Yeah.
He's very handsome, but you gotta admit he looks a little turtly.
Just
absolutely-
take.
He looks like the turtliest member of the Turtle Club.
No, I don't know. He's ridiculously attractive.
I love the guy. Don't get me wrong.
He's a really great actor. But anyway, so, like Tom, I thought that was really funny because in a lot of he spent so much time with his shirt off. He was like allergic to his shirt.
Oh, yeah.
There was like even I was going, oh God, put on a fucking shirt, will you?
You look cold. Oh, well, he doesn't look cold, and nobody looks anything but sweaty at the time, or covered in grease. Yeah. You know, like, yeah, I would say he looks good. He definitely, like, worked out a lot and bulked up for this movie. He's in this kind of weird space where, like, he's one of those guys who just looks like a leading man. You know, it makes sense to cast him in these parts. He's a very sturdy, like, masculine-looking type of
What
dude.
year was the Shark movie?
Deep Blue Sea.
Yes.
1998. So, like, his kind of big breakout, like, he had back-to-back 97. He has a real standout supporting part in Boogie Nights. which
That was really good.
He's incredible
He's
in
really
that
good
movie.
in that.
And then he's got Deep Blue Sea the next year, which is one of my favorite trash movies.
I
Like,
love Deep Blue
that
Sea.
movie's so much fun.
I
Did
feel
they
like
make a
it's
video
so
game about it?
underrated.
No,
Like
tragically.
the moment when Samuel L. Jackson
Yeah.
is just eaten by a fucking shark.
I was cheering when I saw
Spoilers,
that.
jeez.
I mean, oh, come on. The movie's 25 years old. If you haven't gotten to it.
Sorry it came out before I was born. Actually,
No, it
You were
didn't.
born.
98.
Stop trying to de-age
You could have gone to
yourself.
the
was
theaters as a
alive.
1-year-old. Come on. Yeah.
I was 3.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that movie's wild, and I think they've been sort of trying to find the right vehicle for Thomas Jane since, you know, and you know, he had a great part. Like, he had such movie star energy that he was used as a stand-in for a movie star on Arrested Development. He played himself playing a movie star, playing a homeless man, in a funny, like, 2 or 3 episode arc.
Oh man,
you
Arrested
know.
Development is so good.
But like, I think they were really struggling to find something to do with him. But they did nab him as the lead for this movie. I think he looks the part. I don't know that his energy is right because he never.
I think
feels
he
haunted.
looks the part. He looks handsome and sexy as an action star, but he's not. But Frank Castle is not supposed to be an action star. This is not. So this movie is supposed to be a vengeance flick, and it's not a vengeance flick. It's an actiony, it's actiony, but
Yeah.
it's not.
There's too much happening that isn't related to the vengeance. Like it seems like there were multiple plots that they really wanted to include, and it would have been a 3.5 hour movie to do it well, and so they just like hodgepodged pieces together.
Yeah.
Like you have one scene about him dismantling Saint's criminal enterprise, and then we move on to other stuff.
Well, that's the thing. It's when he finally does exact his revenge, it happens very quickly and with very little resistance, you know, so they have to build out this whole movie and kind of pad it out and get to that point where, like, because his revenge is exacted very easily, but he needs to kind of fuck with people first, which is also not really the Punisher's
It's
style.
not the Punisher style, and like the other people who've played the Punisher have this explosive temper about them
Yeah.
that you believe that they would be that violent.
Absolutely.
Thomas Jane doesn't have this smoldering intensity that makes you think that he's gonna fucking shoot you.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is. He just seems like he's too rational for so much
He
of this
seems too
movie.
composed.
Yeah.
He never seems like he's on the edge, other than at the end of the movie after everything's done. And
he never seems to be in grief. They show him drinking, but they never show him crying.
yeah,
Right.
they hint that he might be in grief, but you don't get to actually understand the character. You don't really see them as a human because they just keep cutting around to different actiony bits. I think that this could have been a decent movie, but there was just, I don't know if it was writing, directing, somewhere something definitely hampered it.
There are bits to this movie I like, and I'll get into those. I do want to mention it was considered a bit of a coup at this time to get John Travolta to play the villain. And he was actually first billed in this movie because he just was a bigger name than Tom Jane at this time. And, so it was kind of a big deal. Nowadays, like, you go to any Walmart and there's 150 movies with John Travolta playing a random villain, usually with Tom Jane.
Well, I mean,
honestly.
wasn't he the villain in Face Off?
He was the villain.
Yeah, well, he was
in-
both.
Well, he was both.
yeah.
It's a good guy and the villain.
See, they took his face.
I haven't seen all of Face Off.
Is there a video game of Face Off?
No, I wish.
No.
We should just watch Face Off 'cause it rules. Yeah. I could eat it. That's a gross line, but it's so funny the way he says it.
What's really funny when I heard that line the first time, I'm like, I really like peaches because I was a kid. I was like, yeah, peaches are great.
Yeah, delicious. Yeah, that's not a euphemism for anything.
Not a euphemism at all. But it was really funny. So the director of this I think he had a different sense of reality because he keeps. Whenever he would talk about this movie, he kept saying that it was like Othello, and I was like, no, dude, Othello is a tragedy, and he's like, that's the entire
tragedy. Yeah.
Well, he didn't paint it as a tragedy, which is like exactly what Punisher is. Punisher is a tragedy. It's a man going crazy through grief and wreaking havoc on other people's families.
Yeah.
But that's why there's the subplot of John Travolta's best friend, who happens to be gay. They just shoehorn that in, setting him up to think that he had sex with his wife.
Yeah.
And so that is the reason why that subplot is in there, because he wanted to be inspired by Othello. When you're like, oh no, dude, that subplot made no fucking sense.
It was totally shoehorned in, and it was also like it didn't matter because it's like, okay, I just made you kill your best friend because you thought he was cheating with your wife, and then I killed you. So
Well,
you don't have to live with these consequences or anything.
It's again, I think execution is off on so many marks.
Yeah.
There's definitely fun scenes and sequences in this movie.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look. This movie's not going to make any historical important lists.
Here's the I'll give the meat of the compliment sandwich here. I've got some good things to say about this movie. Like, I like that it is kind of like a down and dirty like 80s action movie. Like, so no CGI. It's all practical effects and stunts and explosions. So I enjoy that. There's a section in the middle where I think the movie really has some juice, and I wish that they had kind of pursued this as a plot more than the Othello nonsense. And that's where he's getting ambushed by an increasingly weird number of hitmen.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, the aforementioned, there's a moment of real surreality where he's sitting in a diner. A Johnny Cash-looking motherfucker comes in, sits down, plays a little song on his guitar, says, "I wrote that for you," and then 5 minutes later tries to kill him at a truck stop.
And I was like, when he walked in, I was like, are you trying to, like, is this an homage to El Mariachi? Like, what is going on?
But I was specifically say, "I'll sing it at your funeral."
Yeah. I mean, I was watching that, and then the scene where like the big burly Russian with the white and red shirt, played by Kevin Nash.
I actually really liked that.
I
liked that scene.
No,
It was so
I'm
much
telling
fun.
you.
There is something really fun and 80s-esque when you have a giant Russian beating up a tiny American. Even though
Yeah.
Thomas Jane is not tiny, but he looks so petite. He looks like he could head tuck him and snuggle him and put him in bed.
Like I think the thing that shines in that sequence is the humor that's present throughout that sequence is, I think, fun and not in your face.
Yeah.
Like when he reaches for his gun and then the strong man smacks it with his barbell and he just looks at the bent gun like, oh, fuck.
That was good, especially because they set up earlier that he went to all this trouble to build this little trap into his workbench so that he could get a gun quickly, and then to have it like diffuse that quickly
And
was pretty fun. But I mean,
think, sorry to interrupt, but I think
No.
one of the things that made that scene honestly better than the majority of the movie was that he's not winning.
no.
He is fighting. He's struggling, whereas the rest of the movie, he's winning in every circumstance.
Well, it's so interesting when you start off at the beginning and they don't even just kill, like traditionally in the Frank Castle things and the traditional action hero star when you like fridge your ladies. What's the phrase? Fridge your women?
Fridging, yeah. Fridging is a Gail Simone term. If you're not familiar, it means when a female character is summarily murdered to provide motivation for the male character.
It was from Green Lantern, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, they fridge his entire extended family.
Okay.
So they kill like 40 people.
This is really fucked up that I laughed at this. This movie put me in this position because it's such an escalation of the revenge movie trope. It's like, oh my God, he killed my wife and daughter. It's like, oh no, it just happens I was having a whole ass family reunion. They killed Aunt Gladys. No. Like, I shouldn't have been laughing at this, but it was kind of ridiculous.
I have to admit that I was smirking a little bit because it's such an escalation.
It's so over the top.
It's so wild. Is in the scene before, I think everything leading up to that scene kind of helps set the tone for the movie. Yeah. Because you have this moment where, drug bust goes bad, or an arms deal that's being set up by Thomas Jane undercover. Yeah. Well, goes bad, whatever.
You know, they didn't actually kill the FBI agent that killed his son. You know that, don't you?
No. No. He got away. He's
they killed Frank Castle.
They went after the guy who orchestrated it, but not the guy who shot. But then they do like, the saints are, funeral black and, they're asking like, they're giving the order of like, all right, find the guy who did this and kill him.
Yeah, and then of course the woman has to escalate it because it's like the misogyny. Like kill his whole family.
Yeah, it's such a cheesy fucking scene. It really, you're like, all right, if you expected a masterpiece the rest of the movie, I don't know what to tell you.
Right. Yeah. This is John Travolta's wife is played by Laura Herring, who you might know from Mulholland Drive. Like, she's capable of great performances, and here she's kind of...
Which one was Mulholland Drive? Was that with Samuel Jackson?
No, that's you're thinking of Lakeshore Terrace.
Yes.
Terrace.
Mulholland
Drive is the David Lynch movie.
It's very weird.
Very weird, very cool. Yeah.
I
we
watched
review another movie.
No, because like Mulholland Drive, when I watched it, I was an adult. Yeah. And I was an adult, and I watched it during the pandemic, and I think at the time it was probably revolutionary depiction of lesbians, but now you're like, oh, dead lesbians. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like...
Fair. All right. I mean, look, that is a scene that is titillating in a way that it probably wouldn't be shot now, maybe.
I don't even have a problem with the sexiness scenes. I just like... It's like, oh, you're a lesbian, therefore you must be mad. You know what I mean? You're like, oh,
there's
crazy.
A lot of rage.
My brain from being into women. My brain is so hysterical.
Poor woman brain. Oh no.
She does do a lot of rage masturbating in that movie. That's fair. That is true.
Was that movie written by a guy? And also, I don't think I've ever heard of rage masturbating.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. I've just introduced it to you.
Watch Mulholland Drive.
Yeah, there's a lot of rage. Anyway, that's Laura Herring. But yeah, no, this whole family execution scene, like also Roy Scheider from Jaws is his dad randomly.
And
I'm like,
you know what's really funny? When I was like Roy Scheider, I know him now as a person from Jaws. Yeah. But when I was like a kid or a teenager,
I think I know what you're gonna say.
Sequest DSV.
The talking dolphin Star Trek.
It was so good. I loved that show.
100%.
When was this show on air?
93 was when it came
out.
I watched it. Yeah, I was obsessed with it. It had a talking dolphin. It was great. Yes. Yeah. And then later you're like, oh shit, Roy Scheider's in like all that jazz. Like he's in the French Connection. Like he's a great actor. But that's the other like good point I will give to this movie. Really good cast here. Mm-hmm. You have a very young Ben Foster before he kind of like blew up.
I didn't recognize him until a minute later. Like Christian was like, "Hey," because I had just listened to the Mark Maron podcast with Ben Foster.
Oh, was he on it?
Yeah. It was just like I was like, "What? No, that's what."
Great actor. Great actor. I think he's good in this movie. I think Rebecca Romaine Stamos is good in this movie. Like Will Patton, who plays his John Travolta's like best friend, the gay guy who gets murdered. Like really good performance from Will Patton. Like he's a good actor. Like, so you have all of this in its favor.
And to be honest, like I really like how they didn't play him effect, if you know what I mean.
Right.
They
Yeah.
could have played it a lot more flamboyant.
And this is, I mean, it's sort of it's about as far as they're willing to go with the homosexual plot line in 2004. But it's similar to what happens to a character on The Sopranos. Like that's a big storyline, is like a character in the mob who is afraid of being out because it'll get him killed, you know? So there's something to that, but it's like you said, it's shoehorning in this real, this tragedy as a way of sort of like compounding the pain or anything like that. But Punisher is not that strategic of a character. Like he shoots first and doesn't ask questions later. He's a mindless killing machine. And so a way to get around that, a way to like make this character still work and still have this movie be like fun, is to do what they seemed like they were doing with a series of escalatingly weird hitmen that are trying to kill him.
It's easier
while he's also escalating more and more in attacks against the family, attacks against the criminal enterprises, and then the retaliatory hitmen. But they just like don't.
Yeah.
Well, and they show him trying to take down his enterprise by burning money, but you're like, he's not planning to do that the whole time. He's planning to murder the whole time. And I do like the quirky hitman. I like that a lot. But I think it's also hard to like him because he just keeps murdering groups of people. And you're just like, ugh. They're just not that menacing. Like, and they're also like... it's just a little bit like well,
and you're missing all of that ambiguity that comes with the Punisher character. Like you're supposed to be wondering if these people have it coming or not, and you're like, no way, they shot Great Uncle Jerry, like obviously they're gonna die. Like it's they really try and soften him out so that he is still a relatable character that we can root for, which is the wrong approach.
And they have one of the reasons they shoehorned this allegedly Othello line into it of and like having the Punisher be Iago is that they don't want the Punisher to kill a woman, and like the Punisher kills women.
He kills everybody. Yeah. I mean, and they even try, like, that's kind of what they're doing with the house full of weirdos that he befriends, is they're trying to soften him a little bit. But again, if you go, it's kind of like the outlaw Josie Wales. Have you seen that movie, the Clint Eastwood movie?
Maybe.
Like, one of my favorite Westerns, because it's a movie that starts as a revenge film, and as he's on his journey to revenge, he keeps picking up more and more of these, like, misfit people who are lost, and the bigger his family gets, the less his desire for revenge is, you know, and so it becomes kind of this almost heartwarming thing where he learns to let go of these demons and stuff like that. They seem to be trying to do that with the Punisher in a way that kind of negates the efficacy of the character, you know?
Did you ever watch True Grit? Both of them?
Yeah, both of them.
Now that's a tale of vengeance.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the main thing is, no matter how close they were trying to portray the Punisher to the source material, nothing felt strong enough. Like, you didn't feel an emotional attachment to Castle, because every time you were watching Castle, he was either killing people, preparing to kill people, or just like, if there would have been a scene or just more emotion from him, but they paint him as somebody who's really cold and quiet.
Yeah.
Which seems to clash with what they were doing.
And I think we have a conflict here between, like, the filmmakers are trying to decide whether this is B-movie trash or if this is a more elevated blockbuster. Like you say, they're including, like, literary references, and they're trying to make the character more nuanced and complex. Whereas if you look at, like, kind of the spiritual sequel to this called Punisher Warzone, that's a movie that has no such compunctions about that. That is a big, dumb, joyful action movie where he just, like, shoots the shit out of people and barely has any lines. Like, that they picked a direction on that. They went full B-movie, like, ridiculousness, and it's a much better movie for that. Like, it's a much more enjoyable time.
Yeah, it feels like this one just kind of suffered.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just kind of in that weird in between gray zone.
Did you ever watch Commando?
Yeah, the Schwarzenegger.
Is there a video game of Commando?
I don't think so. There's a video game called Commando that is not related to the movie. But yeah.
I don't know. Watching this movie just made me want to watch Commando because it's like
That's a prototypical like dumb action movie.
action. Yeah, because it's just like, but there's heart to it, and I think this is the thing: is like action movies should have heart.
Yeah.
That revenge movies don't have to have grief.
No.
Well, I mean, revenge movies have to have grief, in my opinion.
Yo, yeah.
And they really didn't show it.
No, they try and, but at the same time, they also didn't show him going far enough into like, oh, this guy snapped and he shut off all his emotions and now he's just a killing machine. Like he's still too human to be, you know. So they're just straddling this line in this
And
way
it
that
drove
kind of
me
softens
crazy
him.
how they kept throwing Rebecca Romaine Stamos at him.
Yeah.
Just be like, my wife just died 5 months ago. Get the fuck off me. Like, geez, have like some boundaries, lady. She's saying no.
Yeah, and also like you yourself said that you seek out people who are bad for you, and you are going after the murderer, and you know he's okay. This also drove me nuts. The one advantage that he had as a character was that the
everyone
mob thought he was dead,
And then he just walks up to like town hall or the police station. It's like, yo, what up?
And literally, there are news stories saying this Frank Castle, famous murderer, is now not dead anymore. So you should
Not
probably
only
go
that-
send people to kill him. Maybe a guy with a guitar.
So, and an example of what throughout this movie, one of the things I think this movie suffers from the most is Frank Castle being a psychic. He knows, he somehow knew that what hole Saint was going to play, and he put his tombstone on that hole. Throughout the movie, he just has psychic powers.
Okay. I do want to say the tombstone thing was a cool move.
But it's so
a
tactically
dumb-
Rolling
it's
my
a dumb
eyes at
thing to
Justin.
do.
I'm
It's so
rolling my
tactically
eyes.
dumb. It's
It's
like
so-
is he like planning a massive like a revenge, or is he just like a mindless killing machine? Like making him plan it out just doesn't feel right for this interpretation of this character.
And
I
then
don't know.
everybody psychically knew where he lived.
Yeah.
Everyone knew. Like how?
Well-
How did they know where he lived?
Well, he probably took out an ad because he's fucking stupid.
They
He's like, by the way,
probably-
I live here.
Could have followed him.
Yeah,
he
he's
doesn't
not-
seem to show that good of awareness.
He drives the loudest car in the world and it has armor for a windshield. He stands out.
And he presumably drove that car to town hall
Yeah.
or wherever. I can't remember where the press conference or whatever was happening. But like in front of the entire press, he's like, yeah, why is nobody in jail? And they're like,
Right.
look, dude, we're trying to figure it out.
But like you get to the final, like the culmination, the climax of this movie that you think like everything is supposed to be building towards is Frank like waging his one-man war against the remainder of Saint's forces, right? And this scene is just so one-sided.
It's so one-sided. There's no like you never feel like you're in fear for Frank Castle.
No.
And you're like, and he just explodes a bunch of shit. And again, my favorite, like again, all superheroes or anti-heroes are great at arts and crafts, creating a skull out of exploded cars.
All right, yeah, I have so many logistical questions about this. Like he must have
all of those cars?
well, it said it was Saint Motors, so it's like apparently Howard Saint's like used car lot or whatever. But he was up on the roof, like scouting it out with like a piece of clear paper or something, like figuring out where everything's gonna be. Like, did he really worked out a pretty detailed visual picture that no one is going to see unless like helicopters come over, I guess. But like the people who would benefit most from seeing that big skull and getting intimidated are all dead.
Yep.
In the middle of that
Whoa.
flaming skull.
Okay. To be... Yeah.
They didn't even give like, and
The one guy was being dragged around
They
into
talk
it, but
about this vengeance plot, but when they're about to kill John Travolta's character Saint, they they give him they don't even give him a second to react
No.
to the idea that he's killed his best friend and his wife for no reason.
I know we spend so much real estate in this movie, like with that subplot, and then it's just kind of like, oh yeah, by the way, that sucked even worse for you than getting dragged into a fire.
I think that's what the movie really suffers from, is that there's too much real estate in places that don't really give it anything.
Yeah.
Like the roommate plot, I get what trying to show that he's, but most of that
It's
probably
a Thanksgiving movie. Punisher is a Thanksgiving movie.
Oh, there we go. Officially, put it on your calendars, everyone, and then download Voodoo and
doesn't
seek
she
this out.
explicitly say it's not Thanksgiving, but I'm gonna say what I'm thankful for?
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, she does. I was like, why are you? I'm like, honestly, who does that? Who has like somebody like this man lost 40 members of his family, and you're gonna ask him what he's thankful for? That's just rude.
Also, I would just like to say I just opened up my Facebook casually, and that's my third time seeing Jeremy Allen White in his underwear today. So apparently every girl I know who does improv also has a thing for a dub air.
Well, it's not a thing for it. It's just an appreciation of art. He's just a work of art.
I'm not embittered about this at all. I just think it's funny that this keeps like coming up for me.
Did you just open Pokemon Go?
Accidentally. I'm fidgety. You guys have your fidget toys. I get to have my fidget toy. This is what happens when you get three people with ADHD together at a table. And we're like, all right, let's focus on a topic. Give me something to twiddle.
The roommate subplot really didn't add anything. She was like, and it seemed like the whole roommate group was aware of the fact that she was going to try to make a move on Castle that night.
Yeah.
Which is just a weird.
They were trying to wingman her. They were
Yeah.
like, "Let's go get dessert. You can make your move, miss."
Yeah, come
Well,
on.
it's
He's
like-
got a lot of guns. He's got to be cool, right?
Well, to be fair, at that point they hadn't seen the lot of guns.
No, yeah, but they
They
knew
just
that
could
he
have
was,
assumed
they-
the lot of guns.
And the FBI somehow the FBI and the PD had no idea where he was, but everyone else knew where he was.
Yeah. But
And his toilet was broken, and he kept going back to the department. Where is he shitting?
I'm shitting at the Kroger.
That's how they followed him.
I know I'm supposed to buy something, but I'm the Punisher. I'm just gonna take a dude.
Somebody saw him at the grocery store and it's like, oh shit.
That's right. It's me, Frank Castle,
But it's
famed
also like-
murderer. Take a picture
Well,
with me.
technically, he's not a famed murderer at that point. He's a.
Yeah, and he was already wanted for murder. The murder of 2 people.
Yeah.
They had him on security cameras murdering 2 people in that building.
He's also good.
Oh,
we should
yeah,
we
that's
should
fair.
shout him out. He's also good at torturing people with popsicles. In a scene I found pretty funny. Also, is that the only other time we've seen Eddie Jemison in a movie besides the Ocean's 11 movies? That's the little Weasley guy from
Yeah.
Ocean's 11. I don't know. I was always unclear, like, where did he come from to get a part in Ocean's 11, which is like an all-star ensemble, and then where did he go after that? And then where do you come from, Cotton Eye Joe? Was my third question for him. Hopefully he can answer.
What was
But
his
no,
name?
Eddie Jemison with an E. Yeah, but like that's kind of where my frustration with this movie comes in, because they have a couple of good ideas for a Punisher movie in here, and they don't seek them out. They don't develop them in any meaningful way. It could be the Josie Wales thing where like these people teach him his humanity again. It could be the series of hitmen going after him. It could just be the Rampage movie.
Well, I think
could
that's
be the
problem
Othello movie.
is that he never lost his humanity. So it would make a lot more sense if these people were down like in movie 3 with the Punisher.
Yeah.
But he never completely loses it as the Punisher.
No.
It's such a weird thing where, again, like I said, you really don't get what's happening with him. Like that's not a thing that's really portrayed to you.
And why didn't all 4 of them get into the weird elevator thing instead of just leaving them out there or just being like, I don't know, he left? Like,
Yeah.
why is this like, oh, I can't talk, and then he has all his piercings ripped out? I don't
Look,
know.
I'm just saying, I'd probably give him up at that point.
Well-
like they're torturing me and maybe they're gonna murder me.
And people can't tell from listening to this, but Justin has like 112 piercings in his face right now. Yeah.
I am a person who not only loves things being like piercings,
Oh, yeah.
but I also love markings on my skin.
Yeah, we
It's
cannot bring him
definitely-
near an MRI. Like it's just a disaster
Yeah,
for
look,
everybody.
it's a 3 hour or it's a 3 day prep for an MRI.
Oh, I believe
So
it. I
it's-
believe it.
I got to get my guy, and then it's a whole thing.
All right. I mean, I feel like I have so many little things to nitpick about this movie, but I want to transition to the game a little bit because I think that's really interesting in its own, and I think
real quick,
we can cover a lot of the same topics here too.
Eddie Jemison,
Yeah.
right, has one film credit, technically uncredited, in a movie called Schizopolis.
Oh
where
yeah,
he was
that's an early Soderbergh movie.
a
Yeah.
nameless numberhead man.
Okay, so he's just like friends with Soderbergh. I
And then
guess.
he was in Ocean's 11 5 years later. No credits in the meantime.
All right.
Like they had
I
a
bet
TV
he's a
role the
producer or
same
something.
year.
Yeah, I bet he does something like behind the scenes. Yeah, but let's transition to this game because I think this one's really interesting. So the Punisher video game came out in January 17th, 2005. It's developed by Volition and published by THQ, and it was
the days
released
of
on
Volition.
PS2, Xbox, and Windows. This is technically the fourth Punisher game to ever be released. The first one came out in 1990 on the NES and PC. That's a behind-the-back like shooting gallery game based on the comic book. There was a sequel to that on the Game Boy, and then there was an arcade beat 'em up in 1993. But this was definitely the most high-profile game associated with the character before or since. Now, this one is not a direct adaptation of the movie. It contains some elements from that, most specifically Thomas Jane voicing the Punisher.
Yes.
Like, he came back to reprise the role, and they have a couple of beats from the movie as well. But they're also borrowing heavily from some of the same comic book storylines that informed the movie.
And
So
boy, is this movie feel more accurate to the source material.
a little
It,
bit.
it
this
feels
game,
more
this
accurate to Punisher.
Yeah.
It definitely.
Maybe not the source material, but it gets a little wild.
Well, I definitely feel like it gets the idea that the Punisher is supposed to be unhinged
Yeah.
and a murderer. I think the scale of murder and the ease of murder are the issues that I have with it. But please continue.
Yeah, this was developed by Volition, who you already mentioned. They made their big splash back in the mid 2000s with a PC game called Descent, which is kind of a weird like first person shooter sort of thing. And in the early 2000s, they made the Red Faction games, which were very carnage driven, very destructive.
Yes. Play all of them.
And this game was actually quite controversial at the time. The original version of this game received an AO rating, which stands for adults only. Now, only 26 games ever have been released in stores with the AO rating, and almost all of them are pornographic. So having this get an AO rating would have been kind of destructive in the similar way that like an NC-17 sort of became box office poison.
It got to a point where Sony and Microsoft didn't want any games to be released as AO.
Right.
Because they're like, this isn't exactly a good image for the console and for the industry.
Yeah.
And so a lot of games, like I think Manhunt was a similar thing where
Manhunt had to get edited down. A few games were canceled rather than have to get an AO rating, like Thrill Kill, games like that from the PS1 era. So this one was pretty shocking, but this was 2005, and I feel like that was sort of the gaming landscape at the time. Booting this game up really took me back and made me realize how much things have changed in video games, which still contain violence, but there was something so gleefully transgressive about the violence in the PS2 Xbox era. Like they were really leaning into it, and some of the games that they made that were leaning into this trend were so over the top and ridiculous. You have
at this point, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, you can chainsaw people's heads off.
Grand Theft Auto, of course, is the main example, but you get things like The Suffering, which is about a bunch of prisoners digging at each other with rusty shivs. You have the Manhunt, which you mentioned, which is
Yeah.
just about serial killers murdering each other.
A whole host of just shooters where you just
Yeah.
go crazy.
Lots of tons of crime things. State of Emergency was a riot simulator. Like they were really making a lot of these games that were capitalizing.
True crime.
Yeah.
There's a whole realm of. There's
it was-
also a Godfather game around this point too.
We will get
the
to it.
Scarface game.
Yeah, we already got to it.
Yeah, yeah.
No, there's a ton of these, and it really brought me back in a way that it surprised me. I definitely played this game when it came out. I remember having a good time with this one. I would have been the target audience of like still getting excited by like, oh, how effed up this game is going to be. Check out how gritty and cool it is.
I'm
you
going to
know?
smash a dude's head with the lid of a coffin.
Yeah, that's sort of the crux of this game, and sort of the really controversial part of it is these interrogation animations. Every once in a while in the game, you can take a victim to a certain spot and interrogate them, and it trigger like a torture mini game. So you'll either like hold their head underwater or use a drill press to like scare them or feed them to a
Accidentally
lion.
drill press their head.
Very easily. I apologize to that guy, but and then the
Doesn't help. He's dead.
and then the rest of the game, like, so that's the stuff that was really shocking. And you can see in the North American release that we played, like, they have pared this down quite a bit by making the executions go black and white, which
Yes.
it's still gruesome as hell, but like giving it like this extreme kind of blown out look is making it more stylish.
And there's some that I don't know for sure, but I would wager that even with black and white, they may have had to. For instance, there's one where you are using a drill press on somebody's head, and when it actually happens, it moves the camera away so you can't see the head. You can just see the motion of pushing the drill press down.
Yeah.
And then you come back to the person dead. Because I think that there were some things that even in black and white, they were like, I don't know if this is going to fly.
Right. And it's extra shocking to think about it now as a Marvel product. Like, with everything we know about what Marvel is today, how it is basically the establishment of filmmaking, and how something this violent and gross would never be allowed underneath the Marvel umbrella.
I mean, this is also pre-Disney.
Pre-Disney,
So-
yeah, the pre-Disney acquisitions. So, like, it's a very interesting time capsule for that reason. Now, how do we feel about the depiction of the Punisher in this game as a character? What do you think, Javan? Like, do you think this is more accurate, more interesting,
I think
less
this
interesting?
is more accurate to what, like, the sense of who the Punisher is. Like, I think it's hard because, like, I don't know, the Punisher seems to be absolutely invincible in this game, and I have a bit of an issue with that.
Yeah.
Because it's just like there's no like thrill to survival. Like, because I like gory games. Like, we played Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Like, I like a creative kill, and they do definitely have a lot of creative kill animations. It just felt like a little problematic because you're like, you enter into a quote unquote crack house, and then you just murder a bunch of people who are using drugs, and you're like, it is just like, you're like, ouch, ouch.
Usually you're shooting them before they even have a chance to brandish a weapon.
Just to set the stage, the game starts you off in an alley in front of the crack house, and a guy tries to steal a woman's purse, and Steve snapped their neck immediately.
Yes.
Again, in game.
In
In real life, I did this, yeah.
But like, so I just like, I don't know, so it's interesting because, like, I played at this time period, I played a bunch of violent games, and I didn't really have an issue with them, but like, it definitely feels like, I like it when the enemies, like, I had no problem with Scarface.
Yeah.
I like it when the enemies are actually bad people, not just people, because you come in and you're like watching people watch TV, and then you kill them while they're watching TV. It just made me feel, it didn't like make the game feel fun.
One thing that I think is very appropriate for this is we played the first 2 levels, and then I poked around in the menus a little bit. Me and Steve had some memories of the previous game, of the game from before, and all that. And we found the news clip section where it's like, this is what the news reported, and the crack house one was just dozens of homeless people murdered.
This is where I want to give this game some props here, actually. I think this game is aware of who Frank is and of what this character is. I think the satire of it, or the public messaging of it, is a little difficult to convey when you are the avatar character doing all of these crimes. But yeah, I think that's an exact right point. Like, think about this like Spider-Man, okay? Like, Spider-Man has all these newspaper headlines about what a menace he is, right? But we know it's because J. Jonah Jameson has a vendetta against him and is just kind of an old crank. With this game, we are seeing the news accurately reporting what we are just doing. All right? It is saying in black and white, yes, somebody went in and murdered a bunch of homeless drug addicts in this house. And that is who our character is, and that is who we're taking control of. So, like, they don't shy away from the single-minded nature of the Punisher as a character.
They
And
may
I
have
will
had
give it props for that.
guns near them, but they were not in the process of committing a crime.
Right. So this game is a third-person shooter that plays quite a lot like Max Payne. I think we were getting a lot of flashbacks of Max Payne, which a lot of games like this had played like during this time.
And I think Max Payne has a more bigger note in the game of like, yeah, you're kind of messed up doing these things, but also these guys are a little more notably bad guys.
That's the thing.
Which again
Like,
doesn't excuse anything, of course. But
you are a crooked cop with your own pill addiction, in Max Payne, and like these guys are much more of a threat. Frank in this game he's built like a tank. He's like a good 2 times taller and 2 times wider than any of the characters that you're facing off against. And like J-Ban was saying, you're kind of a bullet sponge. Like, we never die. We were playing on normal mode. We never died. We never encountered a point where we were getting close to dying.
I started just walking. So when you walk up to people, you can grab them, which then you can execute them, or you can interrogate them, or you can use them as a human shield, or you can just do like the quick kills, which are not super quick.
Yeah.
And I was just sort of walking up and doing it to everybody. There's like 10 people shooting.
Yeah.
And you can do that to all 10 of them and still be fine, because if you interrogate people, you get health.
Yeah.
And if you save the occasional innocent person, you also get health. And those innocent people are just like, dude, I work the cash register.
Yeah.
What the fuck is happening here?
Yeah, and sometimes they react in ways that are like completely inappropriate, like the aforementioned neck snapping. The woman's like, "Oh, thank you, Punisher." It's like she's reacting as if Superman just did something for her.
Or as Steve said during it, as if this was the pizza delivery minigame in Spider-Man 2.
Right, yeah, exactly. They're excited that their pizza's arrived on time and it's not cold. Instead, there's just a dead man on the street.
Like, ma'am, he was trying to take your purse, and now he's lying on the ground fully dead, a foot away from you.
Right, and that's
There
the
should
crux
be
of the character.
some amount of distress right now.
That's the crux of the character. He is this person who has this single-minded idea of what the law should be, and all people who violate the law are culpable to death. And that's kind of what you're playing out here. And it gives this game kind of more of a disturbing tinge than something like Max Payne, where you can sort of contextualize what you're doing. You never lose sight that the Punisher is not a good guy in this, and that he's like using excess force. And there is a kind of interesting conflict here, like with how do you feel about playing as a character like that, you know? Even when they're trying to establish like, oh, they're a chop shop full of gangsters or something, like they never feel like they deserve the punishment that you're giving them. And that makes, I don't know, if nothing else, that makes it interesting. I think the game plays pretty smoothly still, like to this day.
Yeah, I think the aiming could have been better, and it could be sensitivity, stuff like that.
The aiming was... Well,
it's not
didn't,
great.
Well, it didn't matter if you were like, they really wanted you to come in for the close kills.
Yeah.
Like the close kill, they spent all their time on having, I think maybe it saw at least a dozen different close kill animations, at least.
There really were a lot. Like, we didn't run into a lot of the same close kill animations over and over. Like, and he has different ones depending on what weapons you use. Like, you can have one weapon at a time, or you can dual wield certain guns.
Steve dual wielded shotguns.
Felt very cool, gotta be honest.
That was a cool moment.
Especially because there's no downside to like having that, except that you can't throw grenades, I guess. But like, it's not like it's harder to aim or anything if you have 2 of them. It's about the same. No, there is something. There's almost a level of kind of like Dead Rising or something like that, where it's a little fun to just be mowing through crowds of enemies and feeling fairly invincible, but it does put a different tinge on it when these are just like homeless people with addiction issues. Like,
we rolled up on a chop shop and then murdered 107 people.
Nobody really feels like a threat, the way the zombie horde would feel like a threat, so there is that really interesting sort of conflict that's going on in this game. And I don't think the developers are necessarily thinking about it in those terms. I think this is just something that we're bringing to it years later. Like, the point back then, Volition's whole point, I'm sure, was just to make the goriest, grossest, like, action game you could make. And they did that, they got very creative and very dark and very gross with it. And it's a game that still has a certain level of notoriety to this day for its kill scenes. And I think it's become all the more compounded by the fact that, the MCU has become just the de facto form of entertainment. But, I don't know that I would see it through all the way again. But I did play this all the way back when it was new, and I had a good time with it. I had fond memories of it. And I think this game is functional and entertaining, but it does leave a little bit of a film on you.
Yeah, especially, again, with the different perspectives that we have now. When we were kids, it was like, especially for me, but I'm assuming it was similar for y'all.
Yeah.
Video games weren't something crazy mystical to us. Like, we fully understood that every single person in that video game is not real in any way. And so as kids, it was like, oh, this is just a game. Like,
yeah.
None of this is. But now as an adult, we look back at it and we're like, I don't think I even have the motivation to play that game consistently,
right?
And like to finish it, because you're just like, at some point you're like, what am I doing?
Well, it stops being a first-person shooter and just starts becoming a first-person
Third-person shooter
massacre, and you're just like, there's no threat. Like, you can play this game on one life, and it's just like there's no mystery, there's no art to it. The only interesting thing is how you do these kills, and like the kills are interesting, they are creative, but it's just sort of like it gets boring after a while. And I think we're more sophisticated video game users because we want some mystery, we want some challenge.
Yeah. I mean, this definitely isn't as bad as like the No Russian level in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. But it's still like,
Yeah, it's, your mileage may vary on this. I think we have a lot of like, the cutscenes are all very like heavy-handed, like J-Bang, you're pointing out, it's very Taxi Driver-ish, where he's walking around the streets
Yes.
just like, oh, the scum on the streets.
Oh, it was so funny because it was like you're talking about Giuliani's New York when we're like it was the cleanest, safest New York. I mean, we're not talking about Giuliani and Allen days. We're talking about old school. But you're just like he walks around and he's just doing these taxi driver monologues, and you're just like, that's not how New York was in 2005.
I would have loved it if he walked past like the M&M store or something. He's just like, oh, filth. Yeah,
I loved that monologue, which, like, he's doing this while walking along the street and then just randomly walking through alleys, coming out on the other side, and then walking somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's like, what? What are we doing?
I will say Tom Jane probably gets like 10 times as many lines in this game as he does in the movie. Like he's very taciturn in the film, but like he's got a lot of
Well, it's really funny because like you talk about taciturn people, and I'm just like, I couldn't help but think while watching the film, Henry Cavill did it much better as Geralt.
Sure. Yeah. Or as Superman, honestly. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the movie's just such a weird, like, I don't know if it's direction specifically or writing and direction. I guess the directors also helped write it. The director also helped write it.
Yeah.
So it's probably a bit of both.
Yeah, it's a whole confluence, and just the era of action movies, I think, is not one that has aged particularly well. Like this mid 2000s era of like really gritty, like angry men action movies just haven't really held up as well.
Like damn, Riddick is so cheesy. Like there's just so many action movies from that time period where it was like they're trying to do like cool, edgy, badass stuff, and it was edgy then, and what was edgy then is dumb now.
Yeah.
And so like going back and seeing some of these things, like for instance, again, I'll go back to the scene in the last Aliens movie where it was like the shootout thing in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is just cheesy and dumb.
Yeah.
Like this isn't this isn't done in a way that holds up.
Yeah.
It barely held up when it was done.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, a few things to recommend about it, but overall, well, yeah, that might be a good time to segue to the end of here. Do we have any final thoughts on The Punisher?
I think that the Punisher has good scenes and could have probably been a good movie, but it was just weird.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to our rankings then. Is this a good movie, good game, bad movie, bad game, or some mixture in between? I'm curious where J-Band's going to land on this, because I feel like you were having more of a reaction to this couplet of movie and game than you've had to anything before.
I think it's a bad movie, and I think it's a functional game.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's diplomatic. Yeah, I'll say that. How about you, Justin?
Oh, well, another thing that I forgot was, I don't know how relevant this quote has been to anybody else, but weirdly, like, one of my favorite bands has a song named this. But it also has the quote of, "Don't bring a knife to a gunfight," and then he shoots him with the knife.
Oh.
It's just such a weird thing.
That was dumb.
It's just like a dumb little gag, and you're like,
shot it with a knife.
all right.
So stupid.
Okay. And I think that stuff is what really characterizes this movie. I think it's a movie. It's an action movie. I think if you haven't seen it before, it might be a thing to just like throw on, in the sense of when you watch a movie, you're like, this is not going to be a good movie, but I'm going to laugh at it.
There are too
that might
many
be one,
good
but-
things in the world for you to
Yeah.
watch this movie.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's very passable.
The only way you can watch it legally is to pay $8.
Yeah.
I
it's not
like
worth it.
Thomas Jane, so I was nostalgic about the movie. The nostalgia didn't hold up.
Fair.
So I'll say it's a definitely subpar action movie, like at best. The game is an action shooter game.
I like that your ratings are, this is a movie and this is a game.
I'm so bad at being direct about in it. I wouldn't play it now. It doesn't hold up super well, but
I'm gonna go bad movie definitely with some interesting element. It's not a total loss as a movie. There's enough here, I think, that this is maybe like a solid 2-star movie. Like, this is a good example of a 2-star movie. It is not completely without value, but it just never really comes together satisfying way. So I think that rounds it down to a bad movie, if I'm gonna say. And then I'm gonna say kind of a marginal good game. Like, this is a very functionally well-made, kind of creative. It's a fun-to-play game, and I think they are at least aware of the complicated persona that they're trying to play around with, and they're making some nods, at least in that direction. Is it a game I would sit and play all the way through again? No, probably not, because it's locked in a very specific time and place that we can't really go back to. But I'm gonna, if we're putting this on the binary, I'm giving this a bad movie, good game.
When I was looking up this movie, the Rotten Tomato score came up, and I was like, ooh,
What
my
was it, like,
memory is not going to
20-something?
be
29.
29, yeah.
My memory of this movie is not going to hold up.
To be honest,
would
when
say,
I
like, maybe
watched
a
it the first
35.
time, I probably liked this movie.
Yeah, I
definitely
did
liked
too.
it more. I saw it when it was new, and I liked it more then. I think time has not been particularly kind to it, but
Yeah.
maybe that's part of it.
If you want to see Thomas Jane in something that's actually good, watch The Expanse.
Yes, that's right.
It's
That's
a fantastic TV show, one of my favorite pieces of media I've watched.
Well,
Please do it.
perfect.
I love science and sci-fi and space.
Or Boogie
What's
Nights.
Expanse on?
Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Prime. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and I'm sorry we're gonna get a little redundant next week. We're gonna be watching and playing a subject that's very, very similar to the movie we talked about this week. We're
This
talking
means
about
it's going to be completely different.
absolute killing machine, an absolute unit of a little monster named Wally, who is, if anything, he's exacting his own form of justice in the form of hugs. Yeah, that's right. We're talking about Wall-E next week, the Disney Pixar classic from 2008. So we will be back for that. Hopefully, we'll be less punishing. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you next time for Wall-E.
Be good or you'll be punished.